Hi everyone, it's 1 o'clock and time to start today's webinar, How to Start a Business Analysis Career, Debunking the Top 3 Myths with Laura Brandenburg. I am your host today, Deb Oliver, and just a little bit about me. I am one of the business analysts with IIBA, and currently I am the Product Development Manager for BA Professional Development. And you know, webinars are just one way of actually working through your professional development. With IIBA membership, you have access to a lot of tools and resources to help you out with your profession and your practice, such as Babok Guide version 3, the standard for business analysis, and the online library where you have access to hundreds of books. And recently we've added videos delivered by best-selling business authors, speakers, and business leaders, and they cover leadership and business-related topics that support your practice in business analysis. So please have a look at the IIBA website. Also, when you think about the kinds of things that you can do in terms of growing your practice, networking, getting involved in a local chapter, volunteering, writing a quick tip, even presenting at a webinar, not only will it help you grow your skill set, but it also gives back to the profession. You know, when I think about IIBA, we are all about uniting a community of professionals to create better business outcomes. And today's webinar is a testament to that. We have hundreds of people on the line today here to learn more about the business analysis profession and starting your own career in business analysis. And with that, I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Laura Brandenburg. Laura is a best-selling author and internationally recognized leader known for helping professionals start their business analysis careers. With over a decade of experience in the business analysis profession, Laura is with us today to debunk the top 3 myths in starting a business analysis career. Welcome, Laura.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. Today I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and my slides showing okay now?
Just going into, yep, it's good. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. I heard that, like, silence. Just wanted to make sure everybody could hear me okay and that things were showing up all right. Thank you. So thank you for that warm introduction, and so excited to be here with IIBA and to be talking about my favorite topic, which is how to get started in your business analysis career. And today we're going to specifically be talking about 3 myths or kind of challenges that I find people face when they are thinking about getting started, and so how we can work around those myths and kind of start to tell ourselves different stories about what's possible in terms of starting a career in business analysis. Just a little bit about Bridging the Gap and myself. Bridging the Gap has been around for 7 years. It started as a blog for business analysts, and we've really emerged into a professional training organization, virtual training organization for business analysts. There's a lot of free content on my website, Bridging the Gap, as well as a free career planning course, and we do webinars and presentations like this one. I also have virtual courses, templates, and books. And that's all part of our business model and how we support the BA profession and professionals like you who are looking to get started in their business analysis careers. All of our virtual courses are endorsed by IIBA for professional credits, so if certification is something on your radar, that's a nice thing to know about as well. But let's talk about the 3 myths that we're going to be debunking today specifically, because these are the things that come up again and again. People who find the website and are reading about their career path and like, but I can't start a BA role because. And one is focusing on an entry-level role, that you must start with an entry-level role. Those work well for people who are new college graduates. But there tend to not be a lot of entry-level roles. And if you've looked at the job descriptions in your local market lately, you'll probably find the largest body of roles require 3 or 5 or 8 years of experience as a business analyst. So if that's the case, how do you get started if you don't feel like you have that experience? We're going to talk about some very specific strategies for making that happen. The next thing I hear a lot is, oh, but I need to take time off work for an MBA or maybe a really big certificate program, and I don't have time for that or money for that. How can I make that work? And so similarly, we're going to talk about some strategies for emphasizing the experience you do have, the training you do have, leveraging that if you have it. They all can be assets in your career growth, but there is not like one silver bullet educational program or degree or certificate that really guarantees your path into business analysis. So we'll talk about that head-on and some strategies for kind of working around that if it's not something that you have as part of your professional background today. And the third is probably the biggest one, and it's around IT experience or business domain experience. And really these are two separate things, but I lump them together because it's the people who have the IT experience that come to me and say, oh, but I've got to have this business domain experience. It seems like every job is requiring business domain experience that I don't have. And then it's the people with the business domain experience who come to me and it's like, it seems like every job has IT experience that I don't have. And so how am I ever going to get started if I don't have one or the other? And in my experience working with hundreds of people at this point, going through this process, about half, like the profession I think is pretty close to half and half. Half people that come from a technical background and half people that come from more of a business background. And so there's ways to make that happen regardless of where you're starting from, and we'll talk about those strategies. And then finally, I've got kind of like a what else? What else is holding you back? And I would really encourage you to put a question in the question box, or if there's something that we're not formally talking about in the presentation today, to leave those questions and challenges so that we can address them during Q&A. And we're also planning some follow-up webinars where if we don't get to your question today, we'll use that to customize the content and address them in future webinars. So please put those questions in so we can make sure to do something that's super, super valuable for you. As another way of introduction, I want to talk a little bit about what the roadmap into a business analysis career looks like, and then also what do we mean when we say business analyst, and talk about that at a very high level, so we're kind of all starting on a level playing field. So this is a roadmap, or really more of a trail map that I put together that really captured the essence of the different paths that I was seeing people work through to successfully go from not feeling like they were a business analyst to that, like, yes, I'm in my first business analyst job. And this is pretty complex. There's actually, if you go to the website and download the free course or the free link on Bridging the Gap, there's a 45-minute audio lesson that walks you through this. So we won't do that all today because that would take up all of our time together and we'd never get to the myths. But I do want to just reference that as a resource and talk through this really quickly. You'll see kind of over at the top, you just are really confirming your career choice. And I think that's a really important first step to make, is to really think about why you want to be a BA. And the people that I see succeed have a really clear reason and a certain passion for the role. So it's about some of the salary requirements or salary potential, the $90,000 that we see an average BA making, those sorts of things, but also that they're really going to enjoy the work and are excited about creating business change and driving better business outcomes, what Deborah was sharing with us. And then there's really two paths. So are you employed in an office setting today or not? Because what I find is people who are employed in an office setting and have a passion for business analysis probably have either some options to do more business analysis, and that's what kind of that right-hand side of the roadmap covers, or already have skills in business analysis. We're going to talk today specifically about how to find your transferable skills. And if not, that is a good first step, is to look at how can you get employed in an office setting so that you can start to create those opportunities for yourself. And so on the left-hand side, it's more of the job search path of looking at what you're qualified for, whether that's a full-fledged BA role or a transitional role, and kind of seeking out those opportunities. And the roadmap really is circular because we see a lot of people who will start a role that maybe is partially a BA role or not what they consider a full-fledged BA BA role, and then loop back through the roadmap again and continue to expand and evolve their capabilities within business analysis and get promoted to higher levels within business analysis. So again, just a really brief overview of what's covered here, and there's a lot more detail about this on the website. So let's kind of set that baseline. I've been using the term business analysis and business analyst a lot, and what exactly does that mean? And there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice the business analyst role, but at the core of it, how I see the BA role is the person who goes into a project or an idea for a change and really starts eliciting or discovering information. So not yet even requirements at this point, right? But just information. What is it that we need to do? What's the problem that we're trying to solve? Why do we want to solve that problem? What benefit does that have for our organization? And really takes care and understanding of that problem that's going to be solved. So the business benefit or the why behind the project. Really, really critical part of the BA role. It helps ensure that we're focused on what's important and not just getting lost in the weeds of how we might update a specific piece of software to do more things than we do today. What's the real problem that we're solving here? And from that information works with the business stakeholders to scope the solution. And solution here can be an IT solution, and a lot of the jobs that we see in the marketplace today are technology solutions, software solutions, but they can also be business process changes, new roles in the organization, new departments, new ways of doing business. And more we're seeing business process and software change happening together, and even BAs working on roles that really the software is almost secondary if considered at all. So business analysis really covers all of that, all of those types of solutions in the spectrum. And from there, really, that's when we get into the requirements. So what are the details of the change that we're going to make to get to that outcome, that desired outcome that we want to solve that problem? What does that look like in detail? And that can be functional software requirements if we're working on a software project. It can be very detailed business procedures if we're working on a business process type of project. And really, the communicates happens all throughout. So this is not work that we do in a vacuum. This is work that we do engaging with other stakeholders, and we're communicating those requirements, the information, the problem to the sponsor, to the managers, to the technology team, to the people who actually do the work, all throughout. So a lot of communication that happens as part of the business analysis role. It's a really key part of the role. Okay, so with that level set of kind of that general idea of how do people flow into the role and what a business analyst role involves, let's talk about this idea that you must hold out for an entry-level role. And if you're here and if you've done some job search or started looking at BA job descriptions in your local area, most likely you found that most roles require 3 to 5 years of experience, possibly even 8 to 10 for a more senior level role. So if you're here today, even as a mid-career professional who might have 5 or 10 years of experience, but you don't feel like you have BA experience, how do you ever get there, right? So how do you get from not having BA experience to being a BA if nearly every role in your local area requires some business analysis experience? The other thing we'll see is that those entry-level roles that do exist, there's typically a couple of organizations within any local area that really do seek out to hire entry-level BAs and really have a program set up to groom entry-level BAs, but they're really looking for recent college graduates, and they're really probably looking to pay entry-level salaries. And so, if you've been a software developer for 5 or 10 years, that could mean a really significant pay cut and maybe not seem like a great decision for you. So if those things are true, how do you qualify for those more mid-level business analyst roles? And the first thing to focus on is really what transferable skills that you have. And I have worked with people from all different varieties of backgrounds, everything on this list and more. And this would be a great scenario if you have a background that you'd like to talk a little bit more about during Q&A. That would be a great question to put in. But for example, a software developer. So as a software developer, it's not uncommon these days to be meeting with business users, to be demoing your software. And as you demo the software, you're probably going to receive feedback, and you might ask questions to understand that feedback. And that is a lot like the process a BA goes through when we were talking about eliciting information and understanding those requirements. So paying attention to some of those activities that you do maybe as a software developer, but really are more of the business analysis side of the road. As a software tester, I was a QA engineer before I moved into business analysis. And I was actually in a new role in my department doing a type of testing that no one else had really been doing before. And so I was defining the process for doing that testing. And I called it a test plan at the time, but like 10 years later, I realized that what I was doing was really business process analysis, because that test plan, 80% of it was the same project after project after project. And then the other thing I was doing was really engaging business users in the process of validating the software in a way that they hadn't been before. And so again, then I learned that that was called user acceptance testing, and a lot of BA roles today are somewhat involved in that process when there's a large software project. And so again, transferable experience, really relevant to my business analysis career, but at that time I had no even career inclinations to become a business analyst. I was just really excited to be on the software team. Technical writers a lot of times have documentation experience that really prepares them well to write software requirements and do the detailed thinking required behind business analysis. Customer service representatives often have the people skills, the communication skills, the patience of working with people who have problems that they want to have solved, and sometimes really good detailed information about how a product specific to the organization can be improved and how those processes can be improved for the client. And again, project managers, there's a lot of overlap in the roles and responsibilities between project managers and BAs, especially how they're defined in organizations today. So we see a lot of people who are project managers who've been doing things like scoping the project, defining the problem, and maybe even working with business users to define requirements. And that's just become something that they thought of as part of their project management role, though it's really business analysis. So a lot of project managers also have business analysis experience. And so really what you want to do from this information is look at what transferable experience do I have, and how can I draw that out so that when I'm looking at a role that maybe requires 3 to 5 years of experience, even though I haven't had the business analyst title, do I actually have the experience or the skills and the knowledge to do that kind of role? And so here's a quick process flow, right? We're BAs, we love process flows for how to do that. And you can do this again and again as you go through your work history. Is really probably as I was talking there, something popped up from you, like a project you worked on or a special thing that you did or something that is part of your job responsibilities today that you do often and have never thought about it as business analysis. So that's that first step, identify the close, quote-unquote, experience. Put that in a project context or a problem to be solved context. So really look at how does it start, where does it end, what's the outcome from that, and list those responsibilities that you had. And then finally match that to business analysis. We're going to talk in the second piece about some tools for that, but this is where the BABOK can really come in handy, the business analysis body of knowledge, doing some learning about business analysis so that you're consciously learning to talk about your past experience using business analysis terminology so that you can put the right keywords in your resume and talk about those in job interviews and position those qualifications. That's really how you have to do that work to unearth that and to make the match to position yourself as qualified for those opportunities. And the other piece to keep in mind is that you can go through that process of identifying your transferable skills, matching them up with BA skills and BA terminology, and you still might start to find gaps. So as you look at specific opportunities in the job market, you might find, well, I'm really good at the communication side, but I've never really created a requirement specification. Or I'm really good at the documentation side, but I haven't really done that interactive stakeholder part that's so critical to the business analyst role. And so the way to really broaden your skills is to approach your work, no matter what role you are in today, with a business analysis mindset. So I'll just share a couple of examples of how this can work. Analyzing a business process tends to be a really, really good one. One woman I worked with was a software developer and had done some BA work in the past, but was in a very software-focused, more technical role where software developers, we're not engaging with customers, we're not doing any sort of requirements. It was a lot of technical design, a lot of coding. And she really wanted to get back into more of a BA-focused role. And so she created an initiative to analyze a process within her software development team. And we don't think of software development processes as business processes, but it really was a human-focused process done by humans about the software developers to set up new clients. And it was a process that that team really wanted to automate. Software developers love to automate everything. And so they needed to understand the process before they could automate it. And so she took it upon herself to document that process, analyze it as a business process. And through that work, they were actually able to improve the process. She ended up presenting the process to some management teams. So that actually turns us over to the facilitating a meeting. She was able to present that to her management and talk about the pros and cons and what could be automated and what could not, and really showcase that she had these strong communication skills that were also needed for BAs. And that kicked off a circle of virtuous activities, or a virtuous cycle of different BA activities, which is one of the pieces we didn't talk a lot about on the career roadmap, but it's a really important part of the cycle, allowing one business analysis experience to lead to another. Because once you start with a technique, typically more experiences come up, and then as you demonstrate your competence in that kind of activity, people start coming to you to do more of this stuff. So analyzing a process for her led to facilitating a meeting, and that led to showcasing her communication skills, and then she got invited to attend some meetings with customers and users and customers within her organization, and she started sharing her BA career goals, and eventually a role was created specifically for her to be a BA, and so she made that transition from software developer to BA. And that's just how a couple of, approaching your work with a BA mindset can kick off that transformation. If you're maybe even new to some of that, another great thing to think about in terms of a mindset is shadowing a BA or reviewing a specification. And so if that's the piece that is a gap for you, I've never created a requirements document, working side by side with somebody in your organization who does documentation or who is working on a project as a BA and reviewing their work, providing critique on their work. A lot of times if you are a software developer or QA or business user, you might be reviewing specifications like that as part of being on a project team. So just even getting on any project team so you can start to see BA works and shadowing BAs that way is a great way to start to approach your work with more of a BA mindset as well. And finally, not overlooking small things like tasks that your manager might assign you, taking some time to scope that like you would a project or an initiative. And you might not go and create a full-fledged requirements document for a task that your manager asked you to do that's only going to take you a couple of days, but you could definitely send them an email and say, here's what I see as being the main business benefit or the problem that you'd like to have solved out of this project. Here are the pieces that I'm going to do. And again, just getting that practice of putting the scope into words, working and collaborating to make sure that there's a shared understanding of that, and then taking that to the next level. And that's just a really good habit for somebody who's looking to get into a BA role, difficult, and how to again incorporate that BA mindset even outside of a formal business analysis role. Okay, I'm going to take a quick sip of water. So really, when we're talking about the entry-level roles, just to recap, it's all about finding your prior experience, what transferable skills you do have, and then expanding your experience by really approaching your work with using the BA tools and techniques. And that is really the biggest win that I see from people who are new to business analysis and really trying to kickstart their accelerate their transition into the business analysis profession. The next roadblock that you might come up across is, well, what about, an MBA or a certificate or a certification? Do I have to have a specific degree or specific credential to become a business analyst? And this is sort of one of the double-edged swords of where the BA profession is today, because on the one hand, there is no credential that you have to start in a business analysis career. So I like to tell people I'm a dual major in philosophy and English, and I did get a master's in library and information science, but that was actually after I had started as a business analyst, and it was something more specific to the industry I was in at the time. So I got started in business analysis with a degree in philosophy. And I know other people actually as well. It's always, there's a little clique of us, I think, in the BA profession that have those philosophy degrees. So, and I've met accountants and chemists and all kinds of different backgrounds in terms of an educational background in business analysis. So on the one hand, there's not like this must-have credential that you have to have. There's not going to be a barrier there for you. But on the other hand, that means that there's no like simple silver bullet path. And you really need to carve out your own path, which is what we're talking about today. And so let's look at, even though there's not that one credential that you have to have, of course, any credential you do have is something you can highlight and expand on. The other thing is thinking about how you might leverage, we're going to talk about different BA training as well as your IIBA membership to help with this. And so looking for training that really can give you the edge, because when you do invest in training, whether or not it comes with a specific certificate or a specific degree, you can use that to demonstrate your commitment to the profession. You can use that to have confidence. A lot of times it will help you identify those transferable skills by learning more about how business analysts do their work and what the skills and the knowledge that they have. You will see more of the transferable skills you have in your background. You can use it to get feedback on your work. So how, I created a use case or a requirements document or a business process. Did I actually do this the way a BA would do it? So looking for those opportunities is part of a training program you might select. And finally, really focusing on how you can apply those new skills at work. So looking at, if I'm going to invest in this training, how could I use this in my job, even if, again, I'm not a quote-unquote business analyst, to make a bigger contribution to a project. And then you're building the skills and the experience together, which is going to make you a lot more marketable. So thinking about that as a way to fill in maybe a credential gap, if that's becoming a barrier for you. But also not overlooking the value of your IIBA membership. So webinars like these, there's becoming a lot more of them recently. There's also a lot of webinars in the archive about different techniques and skills, and not overlooking as well your chapter meetings where you can learn knowledge and skills. So great way to pick up kind of the lingo behind the profession, as well as just some skills, again, that you might apply directly at work. There's the competency model and the business analysis body of knowledge that you can use to validate your skills as kind of a checklist of what you have and where your gaps are. As Deb was mentioning, meeting recruiters and other practicing BAs at chapter meetings is a huge benefit of the local chapters that you might have. So looking at your local chapter. And I also always hear from BAs like, well, do I have to be a BA before I go to the chapter, or do I have to be certified before I go to a chapter meeting? Most chapters that I have come in contact with have very generous options for people who are not yet even IIBA members or practicing BAs to come to a first meeting or even come to several meetings for a low cost so you can pay by meeting. So there's almost always opportunities to do that as a way to really experiment and to dip your toe and to start meeting other people. So definitely there's not usually a barrier of any sort to go to your first chapter meeting and start to meet practicing BAs and often local recruiters as well. I know here in Denver, there's been several different recruiting organizations who are chapter sponsors, and they're sponsors specifically because they're looking to be at those meetings and recruit BAs, and it's a great resource to tap into to understand what's needed in your specific local area. And then, of course, finally, the certifications, the CBAP and the CCBA, and the new IIBA entry-level certification as well. The name is escaping me. It's not part of my new lingo yet. I need to get there. But those as ways to validate your experience within the profession and knowledge within the profession. So we're seeing those increase in awareness and starting to get listed a little bit more as well. One question I always get here on certifications, so I'll just go ahead and answer that, is again around that idea of a job title versus the experience or the skills. And even when it comes to applying for one of the experience-based certifications, it's not your job title that matters. It's your experience doing the activities of business analysis. So it's very possible that if you've been doing business analysis under a different job title, you could qualify for the CCBA or the CBAP. I've worked with people who thought they weren't BAs, and then within 6 months they were CBAP certified because they just grew in that awareness of how their experience was relevant within business analysis and were able to qualify for that certification. All right. So I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions. Oh, we're doing great. Okay. So myth number 3, and this is, I think, the big one, because this is where it can kind of feel like no matter how many qualifications you have, no matter how good your communication skills are or your requirement skills or how many kind of certifications and credentials and other things that you add to your profile and your resume, there's still this sense of, well, but every job I look at requires SQL or is looking for a programmer or software development background. Or maybe it requires experience in the insurance industry or the retail industry or the healthcare industry or the financial domain industry. Like, how do I possibly qualify for all of these jobs that have all of these special skills layered on top of them? And that's a question I receive a lot. Like, how can I possibly ever be qualified for all these jobs as a business analyst? And the real truth here is that you don't. There's no way that you will ever qualify for all of the business analyst jobs out there. As somebody with a decade of experience and a CBAP, I'm probably qualified for less than half of the BA job roles out there. And that's because employers today still like to layer on kind of these special skills and special areas of expertise. And so I find that it's really helpful to look at the job market in categories instead of kind of like this all-encompassing thing where there's all these different job requirements that we see in lots of different places, kind of compartmentalizing the job market so that you can focus on the opportunities that are going to make the most sense for you. And these 3 categories actually I did not make up. They come from the IIBA competency model. And so they're hybrid, specialist, and generalist. And we're going to talk about all 3 of them. So hybrid roles are where you are really doing a BA role plus something else. And I've listed some common combinations here. So you're the BA, so you do the requirements and the elicitation, and you do the QA, or the testing and the validating, and the user acceptance testing, and making sure the software does what it's supposed to do. We see a lot of BA and project manager combinations, and those could have the title of project manager. We see some of them with the title of BA, but a lot of times even a project management role with that title will have some BA responsibilities. So it's a very common hybrid to have somebody who wears both of those hats. You see a lot of combinations of BA and IT or software developer, and that's like that experience where we're talking about the software developer meeting with end users to understand their requirements, and then to translate those requirements into technical design and code. So very common to see that happen. And when you do, this is where the technical skills come up. Because if you're looking for somebody who is well-versed in a specific programming language or in customizing a specific type of software, then they're really a BA plus an implementer of that solution. And they're really looking for somebody who can specialize in implementing that type of solution. So, we're going to not, sorry, I just had a flash about installing updates. I just want to make sure I click the right thing. Okay, and do not restart my computer. All right, so I was talking about that. That's where we see those IT skills really work their way into job descriptions that might even have the title of business analyst or software analyst or something like that. The other time we see that is when maybe they've seen that people with that background are better in their organization at kind of handling software questions or software development questions, or they really want the BA to also be able to do some of the technical design or kind of adjust stakeholder expectations based around the technical design. A lot of that, as you get more experience, can be really solved with really strong communication skills, both how you deal with the software community as well as how you deal with the business community. But organizations sometimes still have that perception that somebody with a software background or a software skill set will be able to handle that part of the BA role a little bit more effectively. Okay, so that's the hybrid roles and why we see IT skills. Specialist roles, again, this is where we see Agile as a huge specialization within business analysis, affecting a lot of software development teams. So experience on an Agile team or with an Agile credential or experience writing user stories and grooming product backlogs can be a special skill set that really helps tie you into a BA role in an Agile environment. We see specializations within specific business domains, so that's the insurance, retail, finance, whatever it might be in in your local area, especially if there's a lot of companies in a specific industry. You might start to see a lot of organizations require that skill set or domain experience. And the same thing with a tool. So a tool would be any sort of software or usually software. So things like Salesforce.com is a common example, Microsoft SharePoint, and they're usually looking for somebody that understands that tool so that they can more easily write requirements that will fit into the solution inside that tool. And specialists are another double-edged sword within business analysis because it can, again, seem like every role has one of these specializations tapped on top of it. And if you don't have that specialization, that can seem like a roadblock. However, if you have that specialization or that special area of expertise, a lot of times it can help accommodate for maybe a gap in your business analysis profile. So maybe you've got really strong communication skills and you've got a lot of experience in the insurance domain and maybe using a special tool that is common in the insurance industry. But you've maybe got lighter experience on the requirements documentation side. You can kind of pull those areas of specialization together along with your transferable BA skills and really build a profile that's going to qualify you for roles in that specialty and use that focus, again, to find an opportunity that's a great fit for you that will enable you to then start to fill in some of those gaps in your business analyst experience. And those specialties can really run the gamut. So we've talked about the main ones, but looking back at your career history and pulling out tools, domains, different software development methodologies like Agile that you might have experience with, and using that to create a really focused profile of the kinds of jobs that you're going to be most qualified for can help really kickstart your transition into business analysis. And then the final category we'll talk about are more the generalist BA roles. And these are probably the least common in a lot of job markets, but this is what we really all aspire to and want to have more of as business analysts. And this is really the type of role that's focused on the elicitation. So instead of having to have the knowledge in a specific domain, you're eliciting that from business stakeholders. And then you're using techniques and tools and specifications to do the analysis. And you probably have a lot of deep experience in that kind of analysis. And then again, always strong communication skills, because that's always important. And so again, in any local market, you'll probably be able to find some of these generalist roles as well. And some markets are more mature than others. So some markets, and by mature I mean that they're actually hiring BAs more for their generalist BA skills than for their specialist skills or for their hybrid skills and their ability to fill multiple roles. And so as we see the BA profession maturing, we're going to see, I think, hopefully more of those generalist roles, and in some marketplaces you will find more of those, which is great for the profession in that community and great for us as individual BAs as well, who really want to focus on the discipline of business analysis and be able to work in multiple domains and with multiple different types of tools and have a team of people who are supporting all the other roles that should be involved in a project, like the QA and the PM and the software developer. But in today's marketplace, a lot of this all gets kind of jumbled together. And so focusing on the pieces that you really bring to the table can help accelerate your role, or accelerate your transition. Okay, so with that, let's just do a quick recap, and then hopefully there'll be a few questions, Deb, that we can use to really elaborate on the pieces here that you would find most useful. So again, we started by talking about entry-level roles and how most roles require at least a few years of experience, and how you can use your transferable skills to count for that experience, as well as consciously approach your work with more of a BA mindset, so you're expanding your experience. We talked about how there's not a silver bullet in terms of a degree or a certificate or an MBA that you need to get into business analysis. All of those can be a leading edge for you or something to highlight, but none of them are necessary. So really focusing on the value of any training you have or any training you choose to do, and how that's going to help you apply those skills and become more comfortable with the terminology and more adept at doing the work that a BA does. And then we closed with kind of all the special skills that get locked on top of more of the BA roles out in the marketplace, and how you can really focus to find your experience and your expertise and the types of roles that are going to be the best fit for you, and how no BA out there is really qualified for all of those roles. So more important to focus on the roles that are a good fit for you in your career background. So again, I challenge you, if there's other things that are coming up for you and holding you back, I would love to chat about those, or any questions about anything that we covered today. Again, great topics to get in, so we can talk about them today and probably future webinars as well.
That sounds great, Laura. We do have many questions, and I'm going to start with transitioning into the BA space, because that's always a good one. So can you tell us some tips in terms of, if you're looking for to transition into a BA role and you're looking at job postings, what are some of the key skill sets that you would see or you would hope to see in a job posting where you can think that you can actually transfer some of your current skills to match it? And what are the key things that you need to look for?
You mean to find your transferable skills, or to say, like, this is a good BA job posting versus not a BA?
Okay. Well, it's a good posting for me. They may not necessarily say that, we're looking for someone exactly like you, but I can actually identify my skills and say, yeah, I can make my skills work within this position. So what are the key things that I should be looking at?
Yeah, and that really comes from understanding your transferable skills and your specialties and using that as really a checklist. But when you're looking at that posting, a lot of times it'll be like sometimes there's just so many different words for what we call things. And so like elicitation is a great example of that. A lot of times I had done a search a couple years back. I'm sure it hasn't changed all that much. Like elicitation was the term used in the BABAC. But requirements gathering was used something like 6 times more frequently in job postings than elicitation. And so knowing that requirements gathering includes that elicitation process and communication means that, so when you see that term, that's something that you could identify with. Looking for requirements around like specific types of specifications that you might have experience with is also good. So one terminology blip that often comes up for people is around like wireframing or visual modeling or prototyping or screen mock-ups. So we see like all those different terms which are usually used to refer to how would a user interface look to a user in a software piece of software. How can I model that? And we might see any variety of terms used for that. And if you've done something like that, whether it's using a formal tool or not, then you can say, oh, I've done something that looks like a prototype, and so this is a relevant job for me. And so really, I think taking some time to, if there's, you see a lot of skills that are a good fit, but then a few things that you're not sure about, doing some research and some analysis into what that term means so that you can then see, well, maybe there is a match that I'm just not immediately aware of, and I can really tweak my resume to meet this particular job posting.
Thanks, Laura. So what about the entry-level business analyst? So I'm very new to the BA space, and I want to start looking at different employers and be able to get a job. But how do I know that I am at the level where I'm confident enough that I will be getting people to respond to my resumes? So what kind of training should I have just to make it as the bare minimum for being able to apply for an entry-level position?
Yeah, in entry level, I think that's where we do see people who have, an undergraduate degree in, it's not usually called business analysis. I know there's a few universities out there offering like degrees in business analysis, but it could be information systems. It could be more general technology, or maybe a business degree. So having that college degree is usually required, I think, for an entry-level, a true entry-level business analyst role where they're looking for a recent college graduate, as well as really probably some background in going through the main sequence of steps as a BA, some communication, so whether that's through volunteering and work you might do in your school setting as part of professional organizations or internships, some experience writing really clear documents. Maybe they wouldn't be formal requirement specifications, but definitely writing a business plan or some sort of really clear and complete documentation, and then really just experience, I would say, with a project of some sort. And a lot of times an undergraduate program will give you some sort of case study projects to work through so you can experience kind of how to take a project from beginning to end. And those would be things that I think an employer might be looking for a true entry-level role.
Thanks, Laura. You shared with us, Laura, that you started your career as a QA and then you transitioned to becoming a BA. Mm-hmm. And I think that really resonated with a lot of our audience. Can you tell us some of the challenges you faced making that transition?
Sure. So, yeah, my very first, so I went from QA to BA within the same organization. And as a QA, I was really a white box tester, and I was really I was doing the data side of the QA, and you would think that would be SQL databases, but it was like this whole proprietary system that our organization had built to create these really big online searchable databases. And so I understood like the guts of the system. I was still never a coder. Like I still don't know SQL. I'm not that versed in technology. I was not writing the code, but I had that systems mindset of like I understood how all the pieces of our system fit together. And so my very first project as a BA was one of the more complex projects our organization had taken on and had a whole host of new functionality that we had not typically done in our online products before. And I was given this like 2 months, this is, you know, insane, of like 2 months just to get the scope down and work with the business sponsor to figure out what they wanted. Like it seemed like a complete luxury. Like most BAs would just love, oh, 2 months before like we have to start engaging with the software team. But what happened for me, because I had this really detailed understanding and all this time to like think through it, but not time to actually engage with the technical team side of the team, I had it all figured out in my head of how we were going to build the solution, what the technical design would look like the whole thing. And so then we went to the kickoff meeting with the team, and the communication gap I made was like I didn't help them see how I had gotten to this point. I'd been working on it for 2 months, right? And I just like, here, this is what we're building, and it's going to be awesome. And there was so much resistance to that solution and so much like, you're a new BA, how could you possibly know all of this? You're not a developer, right? So like tons of resistance. And it was like a really great career lesson to me that really kind of solving the problem is less important than getting everybody aligned around how to solve that problem. And in future projects really took a lot more discipline to make sure I was engaging people early on and collaborating to come up with those solution ideas and involving more and more people in that process because we ended up having to kind of backtrack and go through that process anyways. And so really big career lesson in that transition. And especially I think kind of to just generalize that from QA to BA generally, a tester, you have that testing mindset of everything that can go wrong, how everything works, and so your tendency is to really jump into those details. And as a business analyst, you really do need to start higher level, make sure you're engaging your stakeholders, really looking at that big picture problem that needs to be solved, and then there's lots of time to go into those details. But you can't jump into those too quickly, and it's a very common thing, I think, for testers to do as new business analysts. Thanks, Deb. Great question.
Thank you for sharing your memory lane. Well, I have another one about, you were talking about getting into the BA mindset, and one thing that you mentioned was shadowing a BA. Can you talk a little bit about the opportunities that exist in terms of internships or apprenticeships that can help people that are really, really new to the profession get into that mindset? Are there opportunities out there for people to do that?
You know, I feel like that is something that's probably typically driven through a university or a college setting. I don't think, I don't see a lot of that advertised like for mid-career professionals, but I would say people who are in a college setting paying attention to the relationships your university or college has with employers in your local marketplace. And again, you don't necessarily have to be in a BA role to be able to apply some of those BA experiences. So there could be a lot of internship opportunities that don't sound much like business analysis where you could probably still do some business analyst or possibly be in contact with a BA. In terms of evaluating an internship opportunity and whether it's going to be likely to put you in contact with BAs, you would really want to look at, you know, is it a business change project or is it a software project? Is there something, is it a project versus maybe ongoing administrative type work that you might get into as an internship? So is there some sort of project that we're doing? And if there's a project, there's likely going to be somebody doing business analysis even if they don't even know they're doing business analyst work. And so you're probably going to learn something from seeing that process and shadowing that process in some way.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, so let's now talk about that person who has experience being a BA, but they've been out of the BA space for lots and lots of years, so 13, 14 years. How do they get back into becoming a BA? What are some of the steps they can take to get back into the market?
Yeah, and do you know, Deb, if they have not been working for that period of time or if they've been doing something else?
They did some teaching, so but teaching not in the not business analysis teaching, but they did some. So they were in education.
Okay. Yeah, so very interesting path. So I think this is where really that transferable skills is still really important, and really thinking through those career experiences that you did have as a BA and not focusing on the technology piece, because the technology has probably changed very significantly since that role that you had before. But really, and it can be hard because 13 years is a long time. Like that QA experience I talked about was probably about that long ago, and it still feels pretty fresh because I've written about it several times. But going back to that, and really being able to position, and the reason that you want to kind of bring that up is when you're in a position of interviewing for a position, you're going to want to talk about those experiences, and you can talk about them as if they happened yesterday, even though they happened 13 or 14 years ago. And I remember as a hiring manager interviewing somebody who'd actually not been out of the market for quite that long. It was more like 5 to 6 years. But we were talking about, the work that she had done as a BA, and she literally, it was like she had just left her BA role for her lunch hour to come interview with me. It was that fresh, it was that present in her language, and that, she could bring up the specific examples and the kind of the challenges she had communicating with people and how she overcame that, and how she used some of the requirement specifications we needed her to do to crystallize things. And so really drawing up that experience is going to be very important, both in terms of positioning it on your resume and in interviewing. And especially with that long of a gap, I would say that's where you want to look at some training to be able to say in your summary, like professionally trained BA or recent training, retraining in business analysis. So you're really positioning yourself as someone with current awareness as well as deep experience, even if it happened a long time ago. And the third thing I would recommend is really somehow tying what you were doing to your now career goals. So teaching seems like it's probably the farthest away from business analysis in the world, but there's a lot that comes out of being a teacher. I'm teaching now in terms of teaching others in the BA profession, and that ability to distill complex concepts into crystallize them and help educate other people on them. That's something that you do as a BA. Possibly some planning or curriculum development. It's a lot like kind of planning out a project. So looking at some of the pieces you can draw and showing that, it's not like I was a BA and then I did this and now I want to go back to BA, but showing more of a nice progression that tells a story of who you are as a professional and why you now want to adjust back to business analysis. So having that as a story, as well as it depends on the specifics of how you would actually organize a resume to do that, but you would want that to jump out from your resume as well.
Thanks, Laura. We have time for one more question, and we've talked a lot about technical skills that you can showcase in your resume. But what about the softer skills that really make us who we are as BAs? So the leadership and influencing skills, the problem solving, the analytical skills. How can we use those kinds of competencies to really showcase what kind of BA we can be?
Yeah, great question, because you really do want that to stand out. A lot of times a recruiter is going to scan for, like, oh, is this somebody familiar with use cases, or have they done business process modeling? but your hiring manager is going to want more that feel for, well, have they handled complex situations and big stakeholder groups and learned new domains? And so what I really recommend is in your bullet points to be looking at how to add details that really tell that story. So for example, you might say, collaborated with 10 stakeholders to define an end-to-end business process. So you're putting that business process technique or technical skill in there, but you're also saying, like, this wasn't just a business process that I did. I collaborated with 10 stakeholders to do this. And that implies that you have some of those communication skills. Adding kind of challenges to your resume that you overcame, like maybe, helped 3 conflicting department heads really reconcile their differing opinions about a software solution through business process analysis. That's not a very well-finessed bullet point, but the idea there of kind of mentioning that conflict, that you're aware that that kind of conflict happens, that you have tools to reconcile it, that you've worked through it with people before. I also like to include bullet points about when I learned a brand new tool. So, went into an organization with no experience with that tool and learned that tool quickly in order to, and sometimes you can include time frames there, like was still able to get requirements completed within a month or whatever that is in that situation. So just showing some of those underlying competencies that are so important, again, to really bring up that you're handling those sorts of situations that a BA handles. And again, those things could happen even if you are not technically a BA. You could have experience reconciling 3 differing opinions about a solution because you worked in that capacity. Maybe you were a manager, or maybe you were the tech lead, or you still had that experience of handling that situation. And so often I think that's what the hiring managers are looking for in a really strong BA candidate, and that's that leadership and communication that you can build in a lot of different skills or a lot of different roles.
Thank you so much, Laura. It is after 2. We do have to close the webinar. And Laura, I really want to thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. We do have lots of questions that we have not been able to answer today. So I just want the audience to know that we will work with Laura to provide answers to those questions and have Laura back with us to help us really understand and really go through more of the questions that you do have about starting your career. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, and have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.